It is such an honor and privilege to introduce my next two guests, James Patterson and Tim Malloy. Patterson is one of the most successful authors of all time, having sold more than 420 million books. He may be best known for his Alex Cross series that were both books and movies, Kiss the Girls and Along Came a Spider. Patterson has also co-written New York Times bestsellers with Bill Clinton, Dolly Parton, and Viola Davis. And in recent years, Patterson has written more nonfiction, from children's books to the book Filthy Rich about pedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein, a book that he co-wrote with Tim Malloy. Malloy and Patterson's most recent book, American Heroes, celebrates and honors some of the greatest heroes in the United States Armed Forces. A 7-time Emmy winner, Tim Malloy is a veteran reporter, former on-air broadcaster, documentary filmmaker, and author. Malloy and Patterson are friends and neighbors in Palm Beach and have worked on a variety of projects before coming together to write American Heroes. Patterson hosted and narrated Malloy's documentary highlighting poor and underserved communities in Lake Okeechobee, Florida, and they both appeared in Filthy Rich, a Netflix documentary based on their best-selling book of the same name. Their latest collaboration, American Heroes, highlights the recipients of the 3 most significant military awards: the Medal of Honor, the Silver Star, and the Distinguished Service Cross. It's a book about courage, bravery, character, and patriotism. In this episode, Patterson, Malloy, and I talk about their incredible latest book, American Heroes. We talk about their past collaborations on Filthy Rich, among others, and how they both got started. We also talk about why these moving, inspirational stories about real American heroes, our men and women in uniform, are tales that we all need to hear. Patterson and Malloy are not only brilliant, but they're hilarious. It was an absolute joy and privilege to sit down with them both, and I'm so very excited for you to listen. Tim Malloy, James Patterson, or Jim Patterson. Should I call you Jim? Can I call you?
Whatever you want. Jim, James, it's all good.
I love that.
James Brendan.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it's such an honor and a delight to have you both on today to talk about American Heroes. But before we get to that, Jim, I wanted to kind of take you back and have you tell the audience a little bit about how you got started as a writer.
I'm just starting now, actually. The one thing about American Heroes, I was thinking today, not to get political, because I hate to get political, but I'm wondering now if maybe the Medal of Honor could go to some Proud Boys. You know what I'm saying? We think, Tim, I don't know. I just don't know what's, it's a mystery. How did I start? Well, you're in Nashville, and I actually pretty much started in Nashville in the sense that I went to grad school there. I had a PhD program, and I took one writing course, and the guy said, you got it. You got the gift. I said, really? Thank you. I love that. And then I started, I had been writing, but I didn't really believe in myself, but he made me believe in myself. So that was a big deal. And then I wrote fiction. I left because of Vietnam, but before I left, I figured I'd pick up a master's, and I did write a little fiction for that. And that was the first that I had done. And then, I went from there.
Did you leave because you went to Vietnam, or
I left because at that point they had the lottery.
Oh,
and
right.
I remember going to a bar when I was down in Vietnam, when I was down in Nashville. And
is that a Freudian slip?
I went with a bunch of guys, and they had the lottery, and we were all going to sit in this bar, and because it was on television, which was bizarre. And my date came up, and my number was like 265, which meant that I would not go to Vietnam. It was a high number. But the trick was you had to leave school by the end of the year, or you would go into the next lottery. So at that point I said, I'll leave and I'll go get a job and whatever the heck. And I also had figured out at that point, I did not want to be an English professor. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to write, and that's what I wanted to do.
So were you getting your PhD then in literature?
Yeah, I had a full ride. I mean, it was a great thing that I had. I mean, at that point, they were paying me room and board and $200 a month. So I was like in heaven. I was in heaven. But I said, I'm just going to go. And I had been encouraged by Professor Sullivan down there, and he said, you can do it. And I went out and I wrote a novel which actually is about a reporter, a newspaper reporter in Nashville.
Oh, stop it.
And I was 26 or whatever, and then it won an Edgar as best first mystery. Yay! Having been turned down by 26 publishers. So what do they know? So anyway, Tim started playing football, and he took a few hits to the head, and then he moved to New York, and he became a famous on-air journalist.
I know he did. I know he did. And Tim, it's amazing to know like the breadth of Tim's fan base. When we were down in Palm Beach, this is years back. Our daughter had
both.
Oh yeah, well, Tim's an old friend, but our daughter.
No, I met a couple of his fans. I thought you met.
You met them
fans.
both. Yeah, I met both of them. I met two of them. Anyway, our daughter had to go to the hospital, and we were waiting in the emergency room. We were supposed to meet Tim for lunch, and I said, "We're at the hospital," and he said, "Oh, I'll come down to meet you." And who knew it was like bringing in like Bono and Bill Clinton combined? I mean, the seas parted when Tim Malloy.
I know the feeling.
You know what I mean? It happens to you all the time when you two are out to dinner.
Well, the first thing that Tim and I did a documentary, and then we got involved, and we were talking about another documentary, and we were going to do it. Tim told me the story about Epstein, which a lot of people at that point didn't know that story. And I said, I don't want to do a documentary. Let's do a book. So that's how Tim and I really got into it, doing the book on Epstein, Filthy Rich.
I was a reporter down here at the time before anybody was really paying attention to him. I had a cop source who said there's this strange guy and there's little girls coming across the bridge and and couldn't really put it all together. But the police department in Palm Beach knew who it was and eventually got him. And I had known Jim a little bit from the Palm Beach Grill. and of course, the documentary.
Well, there's that.
The documentary we made, we worked together on. So I said, the worst person in the world is living about 3 blocks from your house. And he was all in, Leslie. And of course, Epstein was a dangerous and menacing guy. And Jim said, it's going to be all right. Let's go get him. I'm tougher than he is. And so we wrote this book, which did pretty well, but really was the first time anybody really went after this dude. And so I think we I will say, take this much credit. I think we lit the fuse on Jeffrey's eventual demise.
The book did real well. But and I knew it was like, wow, the story is billionaire and these young girls, and it was horrifying. And we had the police interviews with the young girls, which are just stunning and sad and tragic and unbelievable to read. And so I took it out to myself. I went to CNN and NBC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he goes, oh, what's the big deal? I go, hey, what are you kidding? I mean, do you do this for a living and you don't see the big deal in this story? And the only people, the Wall Street Journal covered it, and the Miami Herald. Miami Herald, is that right?
Miami Herald did a big job.
And so the Miami Herald had our part of the story, and then eventually they did their own series 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah.
And the reason that broke, and Tim knows this, it's really weird. Acosta had been, who was at that point, Trump had avoided, he had become Secretary of Labor, or whatever the hell it was. And that's why all the papers and the news, the online stuff, it picked up the story because of the Acosta thing, which was nuts. And people are going, who cares about Acosta? But suddenly they heard this story about Epstein and these girls and the billionaire and the injustice, and that's when the story exploded.
What was the connection between Acosta and Epstein?
He became the U.S. attorney down in Miami from a cabinet post, and suddenly. Right?
Okay, so he was willing to shine light on that, and then Tim,
he's the one that helped Epstein get the very short 13-month sentence.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
He never even went to court. Yeah.
Okay, this is coming back to me, and I see. So just because now I'm remembering him getting that.
That's why the story got picked up by everybody. And then the regular people who are smarter than the people that on these news shows went, wow, this story is unbelievable. And when Tim and I were involved with the documentary, which was on Netflix. Yeah. And it ran during COVID, and 100 million people saw it in the first 10 days. That's the power of Netflix. Yeah. And the story.
Yeah. But so Jim, when you were saying that you were bringing all these interviews to the press, and they were kind of saying, so what's the big deal?
What brought the book to the press?
Okay.
The book.
Oh,
I said, we want to talk about the book. And they're going, oh, what's the big deal? Really? What do you mean, what's the big deal? This story is unbelievable.
Stop it. So what year is that now? Is this like 2015, 2016?
2017, 18, something like
Okay.
that, Tim? Yeah.
Okay, 2018. So, and then Tim, the cops were coming to you. Were they coming to you for help? Like, we need your.
No. There was
Yes?
one cop I knew who did some security at a club, and he knew me just because I was the local news guy. And anyway, he told me, and actually my wife and I, Susan, who you know, Leslie, would be over near the Colony Hotel, and we'd see this guy riding by on bicycles with these beautiful little 15, 16-year-old blonde girls. And Susan kept saying, what is the deal with that? And then we figured out it was Epstein. And the cops weren't coming to us for help. They did a hell of a job in Palm Beach. They nailed the guy, as Jim just said. Then went across the bridge to the U.S. attorney and to the state attorney, and they kind of let the guy off. He got nothing. Year and a half in an ankle bracelet, and went back up to.
I think he got out in 11 months. Something like that. Yeah.
I forgot it.
He got out early.
Good behavior. Of course, he had good behavior. They let him out every day to go to his office.
Yeah,
Literally, picked him up to jail at 9 o'clock in the morning. He had to be back by 6 or something. What is this? Just to add insult to injury. Yeah. So anyway, so that's how Tim and I started, and then we just kept going. And we said, let's do something else, and we got involved with Matt Eversman, who's a friend of Tim's, and I don't really like Matt that much, but we hang out.
I heard
together.
that. I heard that you're not. You don't really respect him.
Talk about Matt and you guys did a documentary. Matt and Tim did over in Afghanistan, right?
I went 4 or 5 years ago. I took Matt to Afghanistan with me to do a story on. We got embedded for a week with the Air Force and the Army, and I was doing aeromedical stories, basically medical stories and trauma and PTSD. And I said, Matt, will you come? And he went, and then he ended up narrating and hosting this thing we called Send Me, and it played on local PBS and did really well. And then Mr. Patterson
which people don't know, Matt Eversman was the sergeant who was portrayed in the movie Black Hawk Down. Amazing guy. And Tim and Matt would do the interviews, and they were just stunning interviews. And then we talked about doing this book, Walk in My Combat Boots. And our mission was that if people in combat read it, they would say, Eversman and Malloy and Patterson got it right. And people who think they know what the military is like would say, I had no idea. And I understand the military better than I ever did after I read it. And then we've continued, and that's where eventually we got to American Heroes.
Tell us about, you get to this idea for this book for American Heroes, and then what's your first step? Tim, how do you kind of helped source or identify?
Tim's idea. Tim said, let's do this one.
Jim and Matt they partnered on 3 books, which are very cool. One about cops, one about nurses, another one. And it seemed logical to continue with the military stuff because the first book, military book, did really, really well. So I thought, why don't we try to interview as many Medal of Honor recipients? There aren't that many alive anymore. Yeah. And then Silver Star and Distinguished Cross, so the 3 top honors you can get in the military. And then I had James Patterson's name and Matt Eversman's name, and I just basically located the people. Matt and Jim took over. Matt interviewed them. Jim crafted edited, crafted the stories, and it like 10-page chapters on each one of them. And it's, Leslie, absolutely riveting stuff. And
one of the things that separates this series of books, Leslie, is we do the interviews tend to be 40, 50 pages, which nobody particularly wants to read. But we take them and we turn them into these 5, 6, 7-page stories in which you get a sense for the person and also their story. So, for example, one of the stories, this guy, Woody Williams, and it's just a great story. And this is back in Iwo Jima. What he did on the beach there was he had a flamethrower, and this flamethrower is like 90 pounds on his back. And they're getting just massacred on that beach. And he just goes and runs at these encampments where the Japanese are and does the flamethrower and takes out these people who are shooting up the beach. And he does it to 7 or 8, and then he gets the Medal of Honor for that. But it's the kind of stuff you just like, nobody could ever do that. Oh my God, it's unbelievable. Right. And all these stories are like that. You read them and you go, I can't believe what they did.
as you read it, you go, geez, would I have done that? I mean, sort of the parameters
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
if you had never done anything like this, nobody in the military would have criticized you. It's way over the top heroism.
Well, I think that, the thing that really struck me, and by the way, as I was reading it and I was on a plane reading it, crying at certain points just by these people's heroism and their courage and how they were willing. I mean, in that particular case, Woody Williams, it was almost like a suicide mission, or at least he thought it was, but it was the only thing, it was the only way to stop them from
No, a lot of them. Dwayne Dewey, I mean, this grenade, in the middle of, and to save his buddies, he put it in his pocket.
Yeah.
And he lived. He lived. It blew up and he lived somehow, It's just stunning. You can't, you say it isn't possible. But there, it's story after story like that. Yeah.
And the thing too, I think, there's or at least there is a conception by some that sort of like, those in World War II were the greatest generation, and they were in so many ways. But then you see the acts of heroism and courage from our guys today who've gone to Afghanistan or in Iraq, and it's the same courage, it's the same bravery.
Tim and I have talked a lot about. It's really useful, and they should actually teach this book in schools or whatever, however they want to get to it, because young people in high school and college, it would be really useful for them to understand duty and sacrifice.
Yeah,
because they don't. They don't know what things that men and women did in this country to get us to the point that we are, good and bad. I mean, some bad things too, but we don't understand. We don't understand duty as much as we ought to, and sacrifice, and what people have done. People that went before us and what they did.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because there was one of them, Patrick Brady, who was the helicopter pilot in Vietnam.
Yeah.
At the end of his chapter, it's a quote from him, or summary of your interview with him, where he said, "I think that young people today need to have the same opportunity to serve their country, to do something for somebody else besides themselves, which is what military service is all about." I mean, it was really moving. And actually, my 12-year-old, who's a history nut, I said to him, "You need to read this book." And it's the perfect book, as you were talking about, Jim, for having schools and for kids to read, because it's there's 5 or 6 pages, or there's no more than 10
very
pages
readable.
on each person's story.
Yeah, which is it's important that these things are readable. If the job is to get kids reading and loving reading, don't give them things that they're going to turn them off. If that's your objective, don't do things they're not going to lead to your objective. And they do it over and over and over again. School boards do it. It's ridiculous. No, especially when they're under 12, 13, 14, do not give them things that turn them off. Turn them on, turn them on, turn them on, turn them on. And this kind of thing, even if it's just a couple of stories, it will turn kids on to reading. It helps. And, one of the interesting things about these medal winners too, and Tim and I have talked about this a lot, when you interview them and when you read the book, they all talk about, they're so modest. All they talk about is the people around them and how everybody around them should have gotten medals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know.
And again, the same thing.
And almost all of them, at least the modern day ones that we talked, not a lot of Iraq and Afghanistan, but we did, all of them said they'd like to go back and they'd do it all over again. They always want to go back.
As long as I live. No. Just kidding.
Well, I thought, I mean, you brought up Woody Williams, which is the Iwo Jima, for the people that are listening, the soldier who went and did all the flamethrowers to stop the Japanese. But his grandson then went into the military, had PTSD, became an alcoholic. I think he was homeless for a bit, and his grandfather kind of pulled him out of that. And then the grandfather was making money speaking, right? Wasn't Woody making money speaking? And then the first thing that Woody wanted to do was start monuments for Gold Star families, which are families of soldiers who've died. And I thought that was, that was a chapter, Jim and Tim, where I was sobbing.
And Matt Eversman, that's been his life since he's gone out, helping veterans, getting people over the hump. We were talking, actually, when we all went out to dinner, Matt and Tim and I, prepping for this, getting ready for this interview.
Thank you for that.
Yes. You're welcome.
Stressful.
But we were talking about how it would really be useful to start a company, and there probably are small companies that try to do it anyway. And the whole objective of the company would be to really prepare vets All right, they've all gone through, and they've been prepared for warfare. They've been prepared for that, and they've been prepared well, and they've gone through and done amazing things, and they've been, the duty and sacrifice, et cetera, to prepare them for the next war, which is to go out into the world once they're back and get jobs. And how do we prepare them and get them ready for that war? That thing of how do they present themselves? How do they talk about themselves? How do they talk about their experience? How do you prepare or help them prepare their own resumes? Because most of these people are tremendous in terms of workers. And they just need the confidence to go out there and present themselves in a way where people can go, yeah, I want to hire that person immediately.
Yeah. It's that transition, right? From being, because it's such a regiment. It's, right. They have the and the military, and then it's a little, less obvious or clear what the steps are once they get out. I think that's a great idea. I don't know what. Yeah.
We'll try to figure out whether we can do something with it, but or somebody's listening or watching.
Yeah. Well, let me know if you need help with that project. I think that's such a meaningful thing to do, because it's a shocking to me that people leave the military and they don't get the support and that story of Woody's grandson. I'm thinking, why is he's homeless and he's drug addicted, clearly because of his PTSD, and there's no one there to support him.
The vet that Tim and I know, and Matt knows her too, and she came out, she was a sergeant, and she had 12 people under her, and these very dangerous missions and whatever. And all of a sudden she's out here and she says, I'm starting this job and they're teaching me like how to fold napkins and again. And she said, what the hell is this? I had 12 people, life and death stuff working for me. And now you don't think I can fold a napkin? And it's so like, what is this? So it's so below their ability and their rank and whatever. And that experience there's nothing like that. Versus even going to, a lot of times when people go to college, that experience in the military is so much more valuable to prepare you for the real world.
For sure. Tim, were you going to say something? I thought.
No, I was just going to say a lot of them come back either through injury or just through emotion, in trouble, post-traumatic stress on some level. And they get just over-medicated by the VA. Matt can talk about that. It's sort of the zombie veteran, and then the veteran under the bridge is probably over-medicated. And plus the injuries were horrifying. The IEDs, different kind of warfare. Legs blown off, arms blown off, genitals blown off, to be blunt, because when those go off, and these guys coming home, a lot of them, and some women, are in disastrously bad shape, and they need psychological counseling and what you guys are talking about. They need jobs. So, no, it's just, I flew on those planes many times with guys just blown to bits, and then they're getting them back to Germany to try to get them over to Walter Reed. I saw one guy die on a plane, and, it's when you do that, you really get a feeling for the sacrifice. And these are not people getting medals. These are grunts. These are people who went out to,
We try to get as much variety as we could. It's a little harder with women because when you go back, there wasn't, most of these medals have to do with combat. And it's just recently when you had more and more women involved in combat. And now, I don't know what the hell is going to happen now, but which is another political thing that I'm not going to step on that particular one this morning. But like Cindy Pritchett in her story, when she was in basic, they wouldn't let her actually handle weapons. This is in the beginning as we're starting to get women into combat a little bit. And it's an amazing story. And I remember she showed up at one of her postings. They were clearly expecting a man. And they said, "Oh my God, you're a woman." And she said, "Yes, I am. And here are my credentials and blah, 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 blah." And she really did know her stuff. Just in terms of the breadth also, we had at this Tom Bennett, a conscientious objector, and the way he threw himself, and he did wind up getting killed. But the bravery he showed was unbelievable.
Yeah, he went to serve his fellow man, not to serve the country in a war, but he went. His brother was the one who helped us tell that story. That was really something.
Tim, tell me about that. So you are the reporter extraordinaire, so kind of how to navigate these things. But where do you start when you're trying to find these people?
Well, you go on, there's a Medal of Honor Society, which and they're a little wary of the media. But when I integrated Jim Patterson's name and Matt Eversman, suddenly they
were really wary.
They said, "Stay the hell away from us." No,
they hung up. They hung up the phone immediately.
Those guys.
Yeah.
No, so that really, and then immediately we had five or six of the Medal of Honor recipients, and then there were ones that are just. We went to a dinner with about 60 of them, and a lot of the most recent ones, Iraqi and Afghanistan guys, are really screwed up, and they were there bouncing off walls and drinking and all that. But Matt interviewed several that were really squared away guys who did incredible. Earl Plumley, unbelievable story from him. We got lucky because I've got not lucky. We have Jim and Matt, so that makes it different. But you start on the internet, basically.
So once you talk to people and you say, "Do you know anybody else we should talk to?"
Right.
Yeah.
And frequently they do. Frequently they do. They know
Yeah,
people
after
that have
their
good
interview,
stories.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, and I guess having Matt, the credibility of Matt, right, and his experience,
Oh yeah.
these people would be more compelled to kind of open up to him, right? Because they knew that he can.
He knows the kind of questions. He's been there. He
Yeah.
knows the right questions. He
Yes.
knows the right responses. At one point, my agent in Washington, Bob Barnett, who knows everybody, and he represents pretty much everybody that comes out of Washington and wants to do a book. And I said, one of these networks, CNN, ought to pick up Matt because he knows how to ask the questions that most of these people don't, because they haven't been
Yep.
through it. They don't know what questions they ask. They don't know how to respond when it's a military story. Most of them don't.
Then he was a Delta guy. He was in Iraq during the surge, kicking in doors and training the Iraqi army. So he had a couple of war theaters, and so his legitimacy is, exceptional.
Yeah, and once again, he's such a modest human being.
So some of you may notice that this podcast doesn't have any commercials or promotions, and that has been so far on purpose. I've been really focused on our content and finding the best and most interesting guests to interview. But the other day, I got a request from a potential sponsor, and I initially told this person no, but I had a really hard time doing that because it was my husband who lives with me and is constantly nagging me to have an ad about his company that he founded and is CEO of. It's a propane company called Tank Farm. Now, while propane is not a really super sexy product, except maybe to him, I've learned a lot about it being married to him. And for those of you that are not as familiar, propane heats your home and your hot water, cooks food, it runs generators. In a lot of cases, it also costs more than it should. And because most companies don't monitor their tanks remotely, people end up running out of propane all the time, which is kind of silly if you think about it. So Tank Farm is just a better kind of propane company. Its prices are lower, they don't charge any fees, there are no contract lock-ins. Everyone who works there is super nice. And they give you a free tank monitor and meter to make sure that you never run out of propane. It's simple, but it's kind of genius, and people love it. You can look them up online. People also love Tank Farm's award-winning app, where you can track your tank levels, your usage, and your pricing. My favorite part about Tank Farm, and yes, we too are customers, is what Tank Farm calls utility billing. By using the meter and monitor that they put on your tank, Tank Farm knows how much propane you use each month, down to the 1/1000th of a gallon. And that's all you pay for it. You only pay for what you use. That means no more giant bills coming from an unexpected delivery, which, as the person who pays the bills in my house, I really appreciate. Right now, Tank Farm is delivering and operating in all of Connecticut, all of Rhode Island, and eastern Massachusetts. So if you live in any of those areas and you use propane, or you want to use propane, you can find out more about Tank Farm and all of their amazing benefits by going to tankfarm.io/theinterview, or you can call them at 855-976-4141 and tell them you heard about them from the interview, and they'll give you a credit of $200 of free propane, which is pretty great. So I'll say it again. You can go to tankfarm.io/theinterview or call 855-976-4141. Save money and claim your $200. And by the way, if you too want to advertise on the interview like Tank Farm, you can reach out to me at Leslie@theinterviewwithleslie.com. And we can get you or your product on the pod. Out of all the people that you all the interviews, Jim, that you read from Matt's notes, was there, and obviously
Well, we
Tim.
talked about some of them. I mean, another one was Ralph Puckett, who was just a huge deal in terms of the Ranger world from when he was in serving overseas to when he came back. And then we actually dedicated the book to him because he died before the book came out. That's correct. Am I right, Tim?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And Matt actually went to his home. We used all the interviews were done by phone. Matt went to go meet
that was
him
the one that
South
Matt,
Carolina
right,
to interview him.
In terms of the experience that we used in the book was, they were just being overwhelmed, his battalion or whatever. And he said, leave me behind. Leave me behind.
Yes.
He'd been wounded, and they wouldn't leave him. Yeah.
I remember the story. Because weren't there there were hundreds of Chinese. I didn't realize the Chinese were so deeply involved in that conflict. So Tim referenced this a little bit earlier, but this is not your first book where you have kind of honored or talked about people that serve others. Did you do a book with Matt on nurses and?
Yeah, we did ER nurses. It's another one. Once again, the mission is that ER nurses would read it and say, Servicemen and Patterson and Malloy got it right.
Yeah.
And they would say, oh my God, I don't know, how do people do this? You talk about PTSD. I mean, in theory, every ER nurse in the world, because what they deal with, and Matt would do most of the interviews, and he said, I can only do one a day. And this is a guy who's seen heavy combat, because it's like they pull one curtain and here's a kid who just lost, his hand, and they pull the next curtain and here's somebody that's having a heart attack, and they pull the next curtain, and it just goes on and on and on, day after day after day. I don't know how people do it. And then, we tried not to make it a COVID book, but all of the nurses had COVID stories. Yeah. And just lots of COVID stories. But we didn't want the book to be about COVID. We wanted it to be about ER nurses. We're doing teachers now. And that's, once again, that's another incredible story. You start thinking, my mother was a teacher forever. And so in theory, I know that category. But what teachers have to go through now, they got, the kids are more unruly than they've ever been. The parents are more involved in unfortunate ways than they've ever been. You've got people from the right pressuring, you got people from the left pressuring them. You have school boards more involved, not letting teachers teach. So it's a really fascinating area to me, and the book is pretty stunning and useful.
Yeah, I'm seeing a theme here with you, Jim, that you like to, sort of highlight those that are kind of, helping others and on the front lines. And
what I think a lot of it is, I mentioned before, I'm doing a business book. It's about disruption, and my whole career has been disruption. I was in advertising, but I've been clean for 40 years. and in my 30s, I was running J. Walter Thompson North America, and it was all about disrupting. It was about change. I will look at things and go, this doesn't make any sense. Not everything, but if it didn't, and I would just say, we're going to fix, and then in publishing, it's the same thing. Who says I'm supposed to write one book a year? I don't want to do that. Who says, I wrote a whole series of books that were novellas. One year, there were these book shots, and did like 90 of those. That year, I did 2,700 pages of outlines, in addition to 2 books. It was insane, whatever. I am insane, but it's always been disrupting. Little Brand had never done a TV commercial. I said, why not? And they said, oh no, we just don't do them. So I went and made one for $1,000, and they went, oh, that's pretty good. We'll do that. But it was just why not? It's not that you have to, but why aren't you doing that? And if you look at the world right now, this is the age of disruption. We're in it. You just, whether it's, artificial intelligence or COVID, in terms of what that is doing still to the workplace, or what's going on in Washington right now, it's just, all bets are off, man. And disruption comes fast and hard, and you got to be ready for it. So, but that's been my whole. Everything I've ever done, it's been, we don't have to do that. Tim and I, let's do a documentary. And when we did the first documentary, we bid it out to 2 companies, one in LA and one in New York. And both bids were like around $750,000.
Yeah.
And Tim and I had both done a bunch of film, and we said, that's BS. And we did it and edited it for 51,000. And it won 2 Emmys. So, I mean, I don't know. We just said, no, that doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. We can make this film.
I mean, I love how you, though, like you sort of pursue any subject that you find, as you said, that you either that you're looking at things that you think are disruptive, or you're just pursuing kind of stories and subjects that interest you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Look, I a couple of years ago, this is not my quote, but it came across, and I think it's more useful for you and for your children than it is for me. But the quote is, "My time here is short. What can I do most beautifully?"
Yeah.
And it focuses you, and it also helps you to make good choices. So I had the opportunity to write a novel with Viola Davis, and I said, yes, that will be a beautiful thing. And we had a good idea for a book, and we're almost done now. Might be doing something with Mr. Beast. Have you heard of Mr. Beast?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I went up to North Carolina and saw him 2 weeks. I don't know if we're going to do it for sure. But once again, I went like, this is interesting. I find this person and what he's doing fascinating, and yet maybe we can do something together if he wants to. Yeah,
you mentioned Bob Arnett, your agent who knows everybody. Yeah. Will Bob come to you with an idea like,
no,
Bill Clinton wants to write a book?
No.
By the way, I read that book.
Well, the Clinton thing, there a little bit. Really what it was Bob had been trying to get President Clinton to write a mystery.
Okay.
Because first of all, Clinton reads everything. He doesn't sleep. He's a vampire. He's a reading vampire. No, he's not a vampire. But he reads, and he reads a lot of mysteries and thrillers. And he had read some of mine. And finally, Bob went to the president, and he said, "Well, would you write a book with James?" And Bill said, "Well, why would James want to write a book with me?" And then Bob came to me, and I said, "Yeah, well, I'm assuming. Let's see if we have an idea that we like." And then, so we did. We wrote, but that was one where Bob did come to me, and he said, "Would you like to do that?" The others, I mean, with Dolly Parton,
tell me about Dolly.
I just called up. Her manager, and I said, "I want to come down." I was thinking we might write a children's book because we both, try to get kids reading. And then I went down and I spent a couple hours with her. We just hit it off. We decided not to write a kid's book. We do an adult book. And I brought a little bit of an outline, and my grandmother has a line, "Hungry dogs run faster." And we're both hungry dogs, Dolly and I. And we just got a kick out of each other. And she said, Jim, she called me Jimmy James, JJ. And she said, "I've written, thousands of country songs." She said, "I could write one standing here on my head. Want to see?" So it was like that. But that's kind of how it goes. And if we hit it off, and we did. So we did something. And then with Viola, same thing. I had a little bit of an idea for a book about abortion in the South, novel, and she really liked the idea. And then we worked on the outline, and now we're almost done with the book.
So you'll meet with them, you see if there's kind of chemistry, right? And then from there, the ideas will evolve.
See where it goes. Yeah. Pretty much. That's kind of how it works. And then there's the regular novels that I write with co-writers or whatever. It generally tends to be people that I've worked with before in some way, shape, or form. I have a book out, just came out, Holmes, Marple, and Poe, right now. And that, weirdly, this is a guy that I work with, and we did a kid series, which won a bunch of Emmys, Kid Stew, but he had never written any fiction at all. And he's like in his late 60s now, and he's great. I don't know how the hell it happened. Tim and I, as he mentioned, we met in a bar. His mom was there. And Tim goes every week. His mom was there. And I didn't really like Tim that much, but I really liked his mom. She was great. Great. And then, I don't know, I think after that, we might have gotten together another time, and we started talking about things we might do. And then we went out and did this documentary, Murder of a Small Town, which was about, Tim had done a lot of reporting about West Palm Beach County, which is very poor. It's the opposite of sort of Palm Beach, the town here, and fascinating area, and gets a lot of bad press, which it shouldn't get. And then my hometown, Newburgh, New York, which at that point was ranked the sixth most violent small town in America.
Yeah.
And Belle Glade was ranked first. So we said, well, let's try to do something that would correct the bad reputation these two towns have.
Yeah. So remind me about that documentary, though, because I remember, Tim, when you were working on it.
Yeah, it's called Murder of a Small Town. Jim narrated, hosted it. We just went out to Belle Glade and Pahokee, the flyover towns that nobody gives a damn about and still don't. And found that there are wonderful, inspiring, incredible people. We profiled some of the football players, but that's sort of the way you get out. But there were so many other stories, and these are people 45 miles from paradise. Jim called it Murder of a Small Town, which is it's murder by neglect.
Yeah,
and it was fun working on it with them.
Yeah, we did one. We turned it to be a spectacular interview, and this young guy, ex-football player, never had any trouble. I think he got pushed into robbing the little market in town, but he went in with a gun. I think he didn't have any choice, but he did. Went in with a gun. The owner was sort of a tough guy, grabbed at the gun went off.
Oh.
Bullet bounced off a bone and killed, so it was really a tragedy. The owner died, and I don't think the kid had anything in his mind to murder anybody or whatever. But he's got a life sentence. He'll never get out unless a governor pardons him or something, which they probably should do at this stage. Anyway, so Tim and I went up and interviewed him, and it was spectacular. It was just a spectacular interview, and we had footage about his father and his father's reaction. This kid had been a great kid for most of his life, and he just made this terrible mistake, and tragedy, obviously, for the family that owned this store.
He killed the white owner, a beloved white family in a very African American town.
Yeah.
So he killed a beloved guy, and he didn't know what he was doing. He's just a dumb 17-year-old kid.
He sends these letters. I don't know how the hell he does it. He prints them, and the words are so little. I have to get a magnifying glass, but it's incredible. He can get about 10,000 words on a piece of paper. But anyway, so we do, and I send him books and a little extra, whatever, every month. A little stuff. It's nothing, but.
Does he have a life sentence, or is he able?
Without parole?
Oh, a double life sentence. It would take a parole. The president could have done it, but he didn't. But get other people to parole. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I know. I mean, the fact that they're as you said, Tim, like there are those communities and they just seem to they're there and and they're in this particular case, it's so close to. I mean, just the contrast, right, between having Palm Beach there and then having, this community so close.
I will say this, it's not just because he's my friend, but even before I knew him, Jim Patterson was going out there and giving books away and pushing for reading initiatives. And so this was something since he just picked up on the documentaries, but he had done this kind of stuff before. So, and not many people are doing Palm Beach, Leslie. They're going to balls.
I know, Jim, that's really, it's those kinds of things, I think, when you are in prison, and I interviewed actually for the podcast a friend of mine who was in prison but did have his sentence commuted by President Bush. But it was because of federal guidelines, long prison sentence for drug trafficking, and he made a mistake and he takes full ownership of it. But anyway, he was talking a lot about what it's like being in prison and just having books and having access to learning or something where is just so important for their survival.
Unfortunately, for a lot of these people, the prison is even so much worse than that. Yeah. We're in the north for a couple of months in the summer. We're like a mile from Sing Sing. So we go there, and that is just a hellhole. Yeah. It's just so difficult for the people who get thrown in there. And one of the weird areas is plea deals. Yeah. Where certain people they'll take because they have where the DA says you're going down, so you can take your choice of going down for 50 years or going down for 5 years, and they go, but I'm innocent. Yeah, okay, well you can take your chances in court, or so plea deal. That's another thing in terms of the justice system. It's really tricky.
Yeah,
Leslie, you're an attorney, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'm actually.
Well, that's enough. Then I didn't know that.
What?
Let's stop this interview. Oh my God, we exposed ourselves so much.
I know. I should have. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Sorry about that, Jim. I didn't mean to.
Yeah. Okay.
Have
Wow.
Jim reveal me, but I don't
What
practice anymore. I don't practice anymore.
You're for real now. You don't need to practice.
All right. So wait, Jim, you mentioned, did you say your mother, what is Hungry Dogs Run Faster is your blog? Did you say your grandmother?
Grandmother, yeah. Hungry Dogs Run Faster. That was one of her lines. She was the person that basically said, you can do it, whatever you want to do. And although she said I would never play in the NBA. She said I couldn't go to my left, so forget about it. But most stuff she would say, you can do it. And that's a big deal for people to have somebody that's going,
yeah,
okay, yep, go for it. You can be a writer. I don't know why you would want to be, but you can be one,
So did you come to her after you had the professor who was like, you've got a real talent? Did you then go to her and decide what you were doing and you're going to go bag the
she always
professor?
Like, that's what you want to do. You better get a real job first, but go ahead. And that's always my thing about, we have a bunch of scholarships at Iowa's Writers Workshop, which is one of the best, maybe the best in the country, has been for a long time. And I go out there and I don't want to say it to the kids, but, I'll give a talk and you don't want to say, listen, dudes, you guys are all good writers, but the shit you're writing, you're not going to be able to sell it many places. So unless you want to be a barista who really writes great stuff and every couple of years you get one published by the New Yorker or something, maybe you need to be a little realistic about it and use that. Maybe it's not so bad to do a commercial novel every couple of years rather than working at Starbucks. I don't know. Right. That's just me. But it is, where they're going to, what's going to be the outlet for that talent? You're that good, and then what? You give it to the Sewanee Review, which is great. Yeah, which is great. But you can't earn a living doing that.
It's a funny. I had a friend on the podcast who's a book agent, and she was saying that once writers kind of get to a certain point, even studios or people are going to them saying, we're looking for this kind of content. They're able to write kind of, to deliver, a certain.
Yeah. Which is a drag.
I'm sure it might feel sort of not so compelling for them to do it that way.
Yeah. It's better than, if you can do it still, But writing for Hollywood to me is like, I'd blow my brains out at this stage. I can't do it. I'll go on these calls because we have a lot of projects out there. And the screenwriter will be taking notes from like 30 people. You go like, what? Oh. I mean, who are these people and who gave them the right and why are they experts and why do like 90% of these notes make no sense at all? And why is this poor screenwriter who's, and I'll have read the script and go, this script is really, really good. Yeah. And then you go like, what? It's like crazy. Don't become a screenwriter. Don't do it. Your children. No, I don't care how. Tell them right early on. There should be some horror book. The kids at like 6, this kid that wanted to be a screenwriter and becomes a screenwriter at 6, and it's horrifying. And it's so that they would never ever want to do that. What do you want to be when you grow up, mommy? Anything but a screenwriter. I'm kidding a little bit, but kind of not.
Tell me though, because you mentioned like sort of your calls with Hollywood and stuff. I mean, Alex Cross obviously is one of your biggest fictional characters. How did you come up? How did you?
I have one now with Mike Lupica, and he's 6'9", so he's bigger than Alex. He'll be my biggest fictional character. Yeah, 6'9". Yeah.
What was Alex? 6'2"? Was Alex 6'2"? I don't remember how.
I don't know exactly. 6'2", 6'3", something like that.
But I mean,
well, that's great. I mean, and the new series, which is on Prime Video, it's done incredibly well, which is great. So they're all happy, and I'm happy. And it's Aldous Hodge, who is the plays Alex. He's great. Yeah, and he does the two important things. He's got that intensity. The cop part's great because he's so intense, and then he's great with the kids. And that was never in the movies because they never had room for the kids, and also with Morgan. It's sort of like, well, how old do the kids have to be? But these are little kids in the series with Amazon.
I watched it. I watched a couple. It's excellent.
Oh, good. Okay. All right.
Excellent. Well, you're so right. It's able to kind of, it gives the opportunity to kind of really explore his character. But I mean, was he just something, you're just home one night, had a glass of wine and you're like, I've got this idea, or did he where did he come Was he inspired by anybody? Alex Cross himself, like the character.
Way back?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. In those days, I didn't have a glass of wine. I couldn't afford wine, man. Might have a, Ripple. No. Maybe a beer, water. No, it was right after I went to Vanderbilt. And I don't know, I started writing. A little piece of it was my grandparents had a very small restaurant upstate New York. And the cook chef was a Black woman. And at one point she was having problems with her husband and she moved in with us. And she didn't have any duties in the house. She just was, but I spent a lot of time with her family and they were smart and funny and the music was great and the food was great. And that was a little sense of where the Cross family came from. Not directly, but a little bit of that. And in those days, Hollywood, and they're so, like full of themselves, how sacrosanct they are. And in those days, but pretty much Sidney Poitier was allowed to sort of be an actual Black person. But almost everybody else in the movies had a boombox on their shoulders. And I went like, that's just such crap. And that's why I sat down and created Alex. But now that I know that you're a lawyer, I'm out of here.
You gotta go, Jim.
Thank you so much. That was great. You're really good at this. Tim, since you were off for a while, ask Tim a few more things. I have to go, but thank you.
Okay, bye, Jim.
It was really good.
So much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
That's what we call the Vanderbilt people, doors, not Commodores, doors. Bye.
All right, well, let me know next time you're down to visit Dolly. Tim.
Listen.
He's so terrific. I mean, it was so nice of him to take the time. It's so interesting. And, Jim mentioned, that he's working on this book's coming out with Viola Davis and he's working on this business book with someone at Vanderbilt. What's going on? What's next for Tim Malloy? What are you
Believe it, one of the reasons I'm in New York is I'm interviewing a veterinarian who treats snakes. Now, the reason I'm doing is that we're kicking around the idea of doing a book about veterinarians. All these books are the military, nurses, cops, who serve other people. That's basically it.
Yeah.
And veterinarians, once you start digging into it, hippopotamus docs and things like that are fascinating. So we're kicking around that idea. So I'm just starting up in New York on a research trip to work on that. I work for a political book. I have another career too. So but the James Patterson part of my life is absolutely spectacular. It's so much fun.
Oh, well, he's such a terrific person. And I was saying to him when you had that, for listeners, Tim had a little tech glitch. So he was off for a second, then joined us, came back. But, I just love how he's interested in so many different subjects and kind of pursues.
He's on fire. How old? I think he's 76, 77. He just very quickly, I don't know if we're still recording or not. It's fine if we are. He is so lightning fast with ideas like the other day, he said to me, all right, well, what about this? He's not proposing I do this, but if he had a writer he wanted to work with, or his own idea. Train pulls into Grand Central Station on a snowy morning. Everybody gets out of the cars except for one car and everybody's dead. Write me 30 pages. Show me that 30 pages and we'll pick it up from there. I mean, that's sort of the way he comes in. Like a little girl wakes up in the morning, she knows more about butterflies than any person on earth. Write me 20 pages. But he'll start with a little tiny concept and then just edit his way through it. He does partner with people, but his hand is in everything,
Yeah.
And he's an editor, writer, publisher. I mean, he's a very interesting guy.
Oh my gosh. And a great person and a great American. This is my first podcast, Tim, episode where I've done I'm discussing a guest with the other guest. I like that. We get to do a full, forensic on.
He's great.
Patterson is, but yeah, no, fascinating. And I just love, how he's so, compelled to tell the stories of, people's stories that aren't always told, right? And those that are, as are you, speaking of terrific people. But I can't wait. I mean, that's really interesting. Keep me posted on what's going on with the veterinarian book. And I know you've got 1,000 other things that you're working on.
Maybe firefighters. I went out to LA for 2 days last week and did some interviews there, but we'll see. Firefighters, obviously, that'd be good.
Yeah. I'm so happy to see you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time this morning and for connecting me to the Tim Jim show. It was really spectacular.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you.
To your family.
You too. That brings us to the end of this episode of The Interview. A huge thank you to James Patterson and Tim Malloy for joining. And as always, thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate or review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. A new episode is released every Wednesday. So until next Wednesday, this is Leslie, and thank you for joining The Interview.